This procedure will be carried out by me. Move aside." Everyone's eyes shifted to me as I spoke. I was already fully prepped and ready to go at any time. But as was to be expected, Scene jumped up and objected. "A person like you is not capable of performing this type of surgery. And after witnessing this circumstance, how can you possibly say something like that? What sort of nerve are you? You've been confined to a tiny, comfortable clinic. It's not your show. You're an excellent physician who genuinely connects with patients, Scene, but you're wasting your time and energy on this resentment. What exactly should you be doing?" As soon as I asked that, the atmosphere in the operating room changed. John Carter is my name. I'm 42, divorced, and living alone at the moment. Neither infidelity nor arguments were the cause of our divorce. We just didn't respect married life the same way. Really, it makes sense. While I was a doctor committed to working in hospitals, my ex-wife was employed in the corporate sector. We have a son and a daughter, but my ex-wife requested a divorce because she was worn out from doing everything alone. Nevertheless, I think it was a friendly split. We both experienced a little more peace of mind after we moved out. I used to feel guilty when I came home and saw my ex-wife's face. She must have wanted to speak up, but she never did. I questioned whether it would be better to establish some distance and have a relationship where we could speak honestly rather than wasting our days mired in suffocating misunderstandings. At least that's what I thought. We might have been able to stay together in some way. Actually, my acquaintances frequently expressed their inability to comprehend how we were able to have a cordial divorce. However, I can state with pride that the decision I made, along with my ex-wife and our kids, was the greatest one for us all. I volunteered for a while at a nearby clinic during that time. But after a while, I found myself going back to the location connected to my history. It was a certain hospital at a university. "John, I'm so happy you've returned. Don't you think it's about time? In addition to a lack of personnel, there have been problems. However, we're depending on you. Although I never thought I'd work here again, I had already made up my mind, so I decided to finish it." I cautiously put my arms into my white coat with that determination. I met a certain man a few weeks after I returned to work. "Hey, old fart, are you still present here?" My coworker Scene was the one grinning sarcastically as he spoke. He is a relatively young doctor, 32 years old, 10 years younger than myself. Scene was a proud Harvard Medical School graduate at the top of his class and a highly proficient physician despite his advanced age. I felt obliged to commend Scene's work because I had seen his consultations and procedures on multiple occasions. That's how spectacular that was. Scene was a doctor who put his patients first. He always paid close attention to his patients' worries, even the slightest ones, and when necessary, he would politely engage in irrelevant small conversation. At first, I admired Scene for his dedication despite his youth. However, his kind and compassionate demeanor toward patients was just a front. His attitude toward fellow medical staff was cold and harsh. How many times do I have to tell you? This is something I've asked for multiple times already. How long have you even been a nurse? If this job isn't for you, why don't you just quit? A young nurse passed by, her face flushed and on the verge of tears. Scene, your tone was out of line. When I admonished him, Scene's face twisted into an unmistakably annoyed expression. His reputation among the nursing staff was rock bottom. At only 32, Scene's medical expertise, good looks, and academic background were flawless. But he had one major flaw: his tendency to nitpick others. It was a major factor holding back his reputation. I figured that since Scene had always excelled at everything, he couldn't understand the struggles of those who couldn't. Even so, that's no excuse for acting the way he does. The nurse he scolded just now looked to be in her mid-20s. She wasn't a rookie, but she wasn't a veteran either. She was somewhere in between. People aren't perfect, and even Scene is bound to make mistakes. If she only had 2 or 3 years of experience, Scene should have taken this as a chance to mentor her. That's what a senior colleague ought to do, but Scene didn't seem to think that way. Mistakes are absolutely unforgivable in the medical field. Even if it's just one of several errors, to us, for the patient, it's a life-altering issue. How could you not understand that? Typical behavior for someone who came from a rural clinic. Scene smirked and swirled his white coat like a cape as he left. He wasn't wrong. We can't afford to make mistakes. But isn't it the role of the teacher to step in and prevent major mistakes before they happen? And properly guide the person who almost made one? I couldn't completely deny what Scene was saying, but I still disapproved of his attitude. Little did I know that Scene's attitude would later lead to a critical situation. One day, Scene walked up to me and said something out of the blue. "Hey, why don't you watch and learn during my surgery, old fart?" I couldn't tell what his real intent was. The only thing that was obvious was that he looked down on me. I've observed Scene's surgeries several times. His every move was efficient, with not a single wasted motion. His techniques minimized the strain on the patient's body. For someone as young as he was, his skill was astonishing. It could only be described as natural talent. As I intently observed the surgery, Scene gave a satisfied smile and said, "Pretty amazing, huh? Surgeries like these don't happen in small-town clinics. Unlike you, I've been observing procedures like this since med school. Sure, some of it is because of the different environments, but this is an insurmountable gap. That's why you should learn from my surgeries. That's probably the only thing you can do, old fart." With that, Scene walked off on his way out. He dumped some miscellaneous tasks on me. Since coming to this university hospital, I hadn't done anything that felt like real doctor's work. On paper, we were equals. But to Scene, I was just a small-town nobody who showed up out of nowhere. He seemed to think that unless he gave me instructions, I wouldn't be able to move on my own. One of the nurses, Mary, who had witnessed the scene, spoke up. Scene can be such a pain. Does he think you're an intern or med student or something? Every time I assist during his surgeries, he gets upset over the smallest things. The other day, a new or nurse mixed up a HEMAT and a CER clamp. He only clicked his tongue during the surgery, but afterward, there was a full-blown lecture. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to rant. Mary gave me a brief apology and quickly ran off, saying she had afternoon duties to attend to. That was the unfiltered opinion of someone who works with Sean. For young nurses who aren't yet used to surgeries, just stepping into the operating room can be nerve-wracking. Even if they make a mistake, like confusing a couple of clamps, explaining things calmly should be enough. There's no need to make it obvious with a sharp sigh and then berate them excessively afterward. Because of this, the nurses always complained when they had to assist during Sean's surgeries. They said he nitpicked over everything and shifted blame when things didn't go his way. However, as you can see, Sean is entirely patient-first, earning overwhelming support from patients, with no shortage of people requesting him for their surgeries. The nurses and other surgical staff couldn't refuse to participate just because they disliked him, so they reluctantly joined in. The atmosphere was noticeably different during Sean's surgeries. I'd observed other surgeons at work a few times, and everything felt smooth and cooperative when it wasn't Sean. Even the newer staff looked relaxed and made no mistakes during those procedures. In other words, Sean's unnecessary pressure was creating a vicious cycle of errors. However, Sean, with his pride, didn't seem to think he was at fault at all. He believed that the blame lay solely with the person who made the mistake. A few days later, as Sean had suggested, I found myself observing another one of his surgeries. "Hey, you. When will you be ready? The patient may be under anesthesia, but that doesn't mean there's no strain on their body. Hurry up." As usual, Sean's angry shout echoed through the room. I'd been watching from the start, and no one seemed to be doing anything particularly wrong. If anything, the only issue was that a new nurse, who was Mary's junior, seemed a bit flustered. However, She was still inexperienced as a nurse and was likely just nervous because Sean was the lead surgeon. There were no other noticeable issues. Yet to Sean, even that was something to criticize, and he started grumbling complaints. I thought to myself, if you have time to lecture, just get on with the surgery already. But I kept those words to myself. Finally, the surgery began, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. Despite the procedure being relatively complex, Sean's movements were precise, without any hesitation. I watched with a sense of relief until the unthinkable happened. The patient's vitals suddenly became unstable. The anesthesiologist immediately stepped in, and Sean shifted gears to try to handle it, but the situation kept getting worse. "Sean, this is bad. We need to call the chief of surgery immediately." "Shut up. I can handle this. Don't you dare give orders to me. You're just a nurse, and I'm the doctor." This was bad. That thought flashed through my mind instinctively. While Sean's skills were undoubtedly top-notch, it seemed he had never encountered a situation like this before. He was panicking, badly. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and no matter how much he wiped it away, more kept dripping down. The assistant surgeon, the junior doctor who had just finished their residency, was clearly lost and had no idea how to respond. Just as Mary suggested, calling the chief of surgery immediately and switching to an emergency operation was the right call. Fortunately, during the pre-op conference, this scenario had been considered, and the chief of surgery had stayed on standby just in case. That's why handing things over to the chief of surgery would be the best choice for the patient. But Sean didn't do that. "Sean, enough. If this keeps up, this patient's life is at risk," Mary shouted in frustration. She was the most senior and experienced nurse in the room, and she must have realized that if she didn't speak up, no one else would. The assistant surgeon looked utterly confused, unsure of what to do. I fought it over. If I stepped in now, it could cause chaos. If they handed the scalpel to an unknown doctor who came from some small-town clinic, any mistake, no matter how small, could lead to disaster. Those thoughts kept swirling in my head. But then a memory from my past resurfaced. That cursed incident was the very reason I had to leave this university hospital. It happened when I was 32, the same age Sean is now. Back then, I was hailed as a rising star, having graduated at the top of my class. I never sought out that kind of recognition, but being a top graduate followed me everywhere, both as a blessing and a curse. My peers would say things like, "We're counting on you." But my superiors didn't view me favorably. Even though I wasn't being cocky, they whispered behind my back and fed baseless rumors about me to patients. It seemed like they were trying to hinder my work and make me stumble. Just as they had hoped, I ended up making a catastrophic mistake that almost cost me everything. In the end, the chief of surgery at the time stepped in and saved the patient. But it was a close call that could have cost a life. The incident was settled out of court, but my confidence as a doctor was shattered. I was set up. The doctors who hated me orchestrated it all. Even though people knew the truth, no one could speak up due to the power dynamics, and I ended up leaving the hospital. After that, I used a connection to work at a small town clinic, where I met my ex-wife, got married, and was blessed with children. In that quiet town, where more than half the population were seniors, I assisted the elderly head doctor and immersed myself in my work. Looking back, I realized I had been living in a fort zone. But that was how I slowly regained my self-esteem. However, after my divorce and returning to this hospital, those memories from back then came flooding back vividly. Sean and I, we're alike. That realization made me unable to sit still any longer. "I'll take over. Step aside." All eyes in the room turned toward me. I was fully prepared to perform the surgery at any moment. As expected, Sean immediately lashed out. "This isn't a surgery someone like you can handle. And how can you even say that, seeing this situation?" What kind of nerve do you have? You're just some doctor from a cozy small-town clinic. Stay out of this. CASW stopped there. The chief of surgery was notified, and he said, if John is there, he wants John to take over. What? Not only Sean, but everyone else looked shocked and turned to stare at me again. I made eye contact with the anesthesiologist and gave a slight nod. If this pointless argument dragged on any longer, the patient could suffer permanent damage. That was something I absolutely couldn't allow. Sean seemed too shaken to resist when I gently placed my hand on his shoulder, and he stepped back. He slowly took in the scene and realized that this situation was beyond what he could handle. I'm switching this to an emergency procedure. The chief of surgery has authorized me to lead. Sean, you'll be the primary assistant. You, I pointed, please act as the second assistant. When I said that, the younger doctor nodded and urged Joa to take his place. But Sean didn't move. He looked like he couldn't accept being replaced as the lead surgeon. But it wasn't even my mistake. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Enough. Why did you become a doctor in the first place? Are you going to let your pride take precedence over the patient's life? If that's the case, you'd be better off quitting altogether. Sean's eyes widened. He'd probably never been spoken to like that before. And of course, he was an elite, acknowledged by everyone. But being an elite doesn't make someone perfect. That's precisely why advice from others is necessary. But no one dared to offer advice to someone like Sean, a top graduate from Harvard. Being at the top can be isolating. You have to keep climbing your way up, constantly battling the fear of being overtaken. Seeking guidance from someone else feels shameful, as if admitting defeat. I had secretly felt that way when I was younger too. I never showed it, but I clung to the pride of being a top graduate. Sean, you're a remarkable doctor who truly connects with your patients. But you're not the type to waste away in a place like this. So what is it you're supposed to be doing right now? The atmosphere in the operating room shifted. To be precise, Sean's expression changed. Understood. Please lead the way. Sean stood before me and looked straight at me with clear, determined eyes. In the end, we overcame a crisis. I was relieved to hear that the patient's condition remained stable. The surgery was supposed to take only a few hours, but the worst-case scenario discussed during the conference occurred, and it ended up taking over 10 hours. But we saved the patient, and that was enough for me. Later that evening, as I walked down the hospital hallway during my night shift, I saw Sean sitting on a bench, deep in thought. Stacks of documents were piled up next to him, along with medical textbooks. As I wondered what he was doing, Sean suddenly looked up, and our eyes met. I scratched my head as I walked over to him. What are you doing here? Wait, is that? The papers Sean was reading were detailed notes on the procedure I had performed during that emergency surgery. That surgery, anyone could tell it was high level. There's no way an average doctor could pull it off. I wanted to believe I could handle it, but my body refused. Even so, I felt I had to do something, and I couldn't step back. After a brief silence, Sean took a deep breath and spoke again. I thought a lot about what you said, about what I should be doing. What I needed to do was support you as the lead surgeon trusted by the chief, and most importantly, save the patient's life. I couldn't pull off a procedure that complex, but you were full of confidence. That's why I decided I had to entrust it to you. So, is that why you're studying the procedure now? Sean nodded slightly. Even as he assisted me during that surgery, he had been carefully observing every move of my scalpel. Sean must have been trying to learn from what I was doing. At the same time, he gave precise instructions to the young doctor serving as the second assistant, and reassured the nurses when they began to panic and almost made mistakes. In that brief moment, it was as though Sean had been freed from something. He seemed like a completely different person. The entire hospital was abuzz with talk about the incident. I found it strange as well. It's not normal for someone to change so dramatically in an instant. It's nearly impossible to change someone's personality overnight. If that were possible, no one would struggle with relationships. There was only one possible explanation. Why did you act that way? Isn't your true self the one I saw when you stood by my side as my assistant that day? Sean said nothing in response to my words. A few days later, I was called to the chief of surgery's office. I'd like you to keep an eye on Sean for a while. Wait. Me? All of a sudden. According to the chief of surgery, Sean had been looking noticeably worn out lately. His consultations were as smooth as ever, and patients still adored him. But many people remarked that he seemed to have lost his spark. The chief explained that Sean's skills were exceptional, too exceptional to let him fade away or leave the hospital entirely. The chief suggested that Sean take some time away from the university hospital and work at the same small-town clinic where I'd spent nearly a decade. I wondered if someone as prideful as Sean would accept that suggestion. But to my surprise, his response was simple. I've been worried about my grandmother, who lives in that town. This is a good opportunity to check in on her. I've been thinking of all kinds of ways to convince Sean to go, but it turned out I didn't need to. A month later, after making all the necessary arrangements, we set out for the town where I'd spent almost 10 years. After a few hours on the train, Sean took a deep breath as he looked at the townscape and said, "This place really hasn't changed. It's still so empty, but somehow it's kind of calming." From there, we took a taxi to the clinic, and during the ride, Sean began quietly sharing his thoughts, little by little. I'm not a great person. I'm more competitive than anyone else, but I've never once beaten my brother, the one person I wanted to surpass the most. My brother graduated as the salutatorian from med school. My only win over him was graduating at the top of my class at Harvard, but we were in completely different leagues to begin with. Aside from that, I've never beaten him at anything. I tried to be perfect, pretending to be a better doctor than him, just so I could be more popular with patients, and that led to this mess. Hearing the self-deprecation in Chan's voice, I was sure of one thing. I get it. I had my own wall up I wanted to overcome, but I struggled for years, especially against your brother, Kevin. He was my greatest rival. Even though I graduated at the top, I could never match his charisma. I had casually mentioned something shocking to Sean, which is probably why he looked so surprised. He blinked rapidly and stared at me. I'd graduated at the top of a prestigious med school, but that was merely a simple fact. Graduating at the top doesn't suddenly make you a superhero. Yet, even as I acted humble outwardly, part of me clung to the belief that I was exceptional. That's probably why I couldn't surpass Kevin. He never cared about rankings or prestige. His dream was to take over his parents' private clinic, and despite having a natural talent for surgery, he chose pediatrics. By now, Kevin must be a respected pediatrician, loved by the people in his hometown. At that point, I knew I could never beat him. A long silence filled the cab after I said that. When we finally arrived at our destination, Ryan, the clinic's director, greeted us with a warm smile. "Hey there. Thanks for coming all this way. You must be Sean. Nice to meet you. I'm Ryan, the director here. And John, it's been a while. I'm grateful you'll be helping us out again." It was a Sunday, so the clinic was closed. Ryan had suggested that Sean should get a feel for the place before jumping into work, which is why we came today. As soon as Sean stepped inside, he froze in surprise and couldn't help but mutter, "Huh." There were patients inside despite it being a Sunday. What's going on here?" I thought the clinic was closed on Sundays and Thursdays. Sean looked confused, so I explained. That's exactly why it's open as a community space today. This town is small and doesn't have many medical facilities. The nearest general hospital is in the next town over, and not every specialty is available here. So Ryan set this place up as a meeting spot on off days so patients can gather and share their concerns with one another. Sean glanced around, looking convinced. About 80% of the visitors were elderly, but there were also some children and younger people mixed in. This space was not only a place for mutual support among people dealing with the same illnesses, it also served another purpose. It said that conversations between seniors and children can help prevent dementia. And for kids, interacting with older folks has positive effects on their behavior and character. It's kind of a way to foster community spirit, turning this town into a place where everyone feels united. This town is inconvenient without a car. There was only one grocery store, and aside from this clinic, there was just one general practice, one dental clinic, and a gynecology clinic that didn't handle deliveries. With no pediatrician or obstetrician, and the need to travel to the next town for surgical injuries, it's clear that this town isn't suitable for raising children. Even minor trips outside town were a burden for the elderly, which led Ryan to come up with an idea. If it's something I can diagnose and treat, I'll handle it here. If necessary, I'll write a referral. Thankfully, the community trusts me enough to let me do that, though of course, there are limits. Ryan gave a small, bittersweet smile. Seeing that made me want to help even more. I could perform surgeries, but without the proper facilities, it was meaningless. This wasn't a remote island where supplies ran out, and if something happened, an ambulance or medevac could rush the patient to a larger hospital. But sometimes, even that wasn't fast enough. It was during one of those moments that my ex-wife provided the solution. Her parents had lived in this town and ran a clinic, one as a general surgeon and the other as an internist. However, both of them retired due to aging, leaving the clinic behind. Since my ex-wife wasn't the doctor and worked in the corporate world, she couldn't run it even if she inherited it. That's when I made a suggestion. I'll cover the renovation costs. Just let me use the clinic as a surgical facility. Thanks to that, we were able to perform simple surgeries in town, and the residents were overjoyed. But I was still just a doctor helping out at Ryan's clinic. In a place with so few doctors, major surgeries were still out of reach, and we often had no choice but to transfer patients to a general hospital. After hearing the full story, Sean asked me a question. Why did someone like you, who graduated at the top of a prestigious university, end up here? With your skills, you can handle everything alone, so why were you just assisting at Ryan's clinic? It was a fair question. Everyone must have wondered the same thing. After I explained the circumstances behind leaving the university hospital, Sean's face darkened. Well, in a way, it gave me time to cool my head. And honestly, I don't regret it. The reason I worked at Ryan's clinic was because this man is the town's beacon of hope. If it weren't for Ryan, the town's healthcare wouldn't have come this far. Most of the residents wanted Ryan's clinic to continue, so I stayed to support that. Why did you choose this town? What's your connection with Ryan? Oh, it's simple. We had a mentor-student relationship back when I was at the university hospital. Wait, Sean murmured. Just as Ryan had said, he was still at the university hospital when I joined as a resident. He was a highly skilled surgeon, admired by everyone, known as a master with no equal. But one day, Ryan disappeared without warning. It was after the incident I faced that I heard Ryan was dedicating himself to improving healthcare in the town where he was born and raised. At that time, the chief of surgery, who wasn't yet the department head, told me this. If anyone can understand and help you heal, it's him. You've been through a lot. I believe in you, so make sure you come back. Encouraged by those words, I left the university hospital and followed Ryan to this town. The time I spent here was some of the happiest and most fulfilling days of my life. This town became my second home. 6 months have passed since Sean came to this town. Sean, who once had a bit of a sharp edge to his personality, now seems much more rounded and approachable. He'd always been patient first, but now it felt like he had taken that to the next level. Now, Shelley, this is how you do it. Oh hey. Joseph, don't run or you'll trip. It's Sunday, The clinic is closed, but C is here as a volunteer, chatting with the townspeople. Sean's handsome appearance and his understanding of kids, likely thanks to being the son of a pediatrician, made him a hit with the kids and their parents. The local moms adored him, and the dads, determined not to be outdone, had started helping out more with housework and childcare, sparking buzz throughout the community. Despite all the praise Sean had received, he himself admitted that he had grown a lot in this town. The people here are so warm and cheerful. I think I finally understand why my grandmother chose to spend the rest of her life here. John, thank you for giving me this opportunity and for introducing me to Ryan. I'm grateful. Since coming to this town, I've had the chance to really think about what it means to be a doctor. As Sean said that with a smile, he looked full of confidence. It wasn't the kind born from arrogance, but rather a genuine radiance from deep within his heart. But where there are meetings, there are also farewells. Sean was still officially a part of the university hospital, so he would eventually have to return. The chief of surgery had always expected him to come back. I also went to Ryan's clinic with the intention of returning, but it took me 10 years to go back. What happened at the university hospital was that shocking for me, I thought. But Sean was different. Before his wounds could cut too deep, he found a way to view himself objectively and recover quickly. His skills were undeniable. Seeing him now, I knew any hospital would jump at the chance to have him. As I thought that, I heard footsteps approaching. Sean turned and froze in shock. "Why is my brother here?" Mary called him. Upon hearing those words, Sean froze, looking even more confused. But Kevin, his brother, looked at him with a gentle gaze. Kevin spoke slowly. "Mary reached out to me. She said my brother-in-law is working hard to pull himself back up, so go check on him." "Wait, brother-in-law? You mean Mary is—" Sean said, his voice trailing off. "I had only recently learned that myself," Kevin replied. That strong wildness. Mary, though younger than us, was a responsible and capable person. Somehow, she and I had been in a relationship and had just recently gotten married. We were both so busy with work that we kept missing the right timing. But Mary told me this: "I'm not marrying you until I see your brother become the amazing doctor he's meant to be." Mary said that. I always thought she couldn't stand me. She was always scolding me, and I wasn't any better to her. I thought she hated me. It was true. Sean and Mary had often argued. But since Mary knew that Sean was her partner's younger brother, she couldn't just ignore him. Would a nurse ever directly confront an arrogant doctor? It's quite rare, and even if it does happen, it's usually in cases where they already know each other. Even so, the reason Mary confronted Sean so directly might have been her sisterly concern for her brother-in-law. Mary might be blunt, but she'd never give up on someone. She's got a kind heart. She said she knew you weren't arrogant, Sean. She saw how kind, sensitive, and determined you really are. C couldn't hold back his tears after hearing those words. "Are you okay?" A small child approached Sean, gently patting his head and speaking softly. Kevin smiled at the sight. "You'll be fine now. Follow the path you believe in. You always felt inferior to me, but I felt the same way about you. You have strengths that I don't. There's no point in brothers fighting each other, right? We're two halves of a whole. Let's stick together from now on." Kevin's broad grin was enormous, and Sean smiled just as brightly in return. As Kevin was about to leave, he turned to me and said, "You've always been my goal, you know. Don't you dare fall from grace or give up." I leaned forward and replied without hesitation, "Of course not. You're my lifelong rival." Later, Mary left the university hospital to become a nurse at Kevin's pediatric clinic, and Sean's journey to becoming a chief surgeon candidate is a story for another time. I'll continue doing what I can. It doesn't matter whether it's at a big hospital or a small town clinic. I'll go wherever people need me. That's what it means to be a doctor.